Welcome, everyone. We truly appreciate you joining us this afternoon to learn more about using Google Apps for Education on an iPad. We know that you play an important role in your students' life and learning, so thank you for taking the time to be here with us. Our goal for this training is to give you some hints to make learning via iPad easier and more fun for your students. During this session, we will get your iPad set up for remote learning, as well as discuss navigation to and within Google Classroom and other Google Apps for Education. My name is Amy Moore, and joining us in the live stream chat is my 5-star colleague, Lisa Cutshell, along with Chicago Public School Family and Community Engagement Support, Ellen Rosenfield. As we go through our presentation, please feel free to add your questions in our live chat if you're on a device that allows you to share. For those just joining on a phone or a device with limited response capability, we will share other ways for you to have a voice and get the answers you need. CPS students in lower grades may be utilizing iPads for remote learning. This can make navigation easier and learning more interactive for younger students. Throughout the session, I hope you'll see the user-friendly nature of both the iPad and Google Apps for Education. If you are able to follow along on an iPad during our session, please feel free to do so. However, if you would rather watch and take notes, that can be just as helpful. You can always come back to this video to rewatch our presentation in the future. Before we jump into iPad navigation, we should note the similarities between an iPad and an iPhone. If you are familiar at all with an iPhone, many of the things we will discuss today will seem very familiar to you. If not, that's perfectly okay as well. We will do our best to give you a basic introduction. Please note, as we discuss navigation of the iPad this evening, we are not referring to the iPad Pro. If you notice you have a different version of the iPad than what we're referencing, please reference the link that we will add to the chat. Our first step in utilizing the iPad is to power on the device. With the iPad held vertically in portrait position, the power button is located at the top right edge. Press and hold this button for about 3 seconds, then release. The Apple logo should appear on the screen briefly before all apps load. Pressing and holding this button again can power the device off. A short click with the power button can turn off the display to save battery. A second short click readies the device for use and turns the display back on. Clicking the circular button at the bottom, which is known as the home button, will display the home screen. Clicking this button at any time will return the iPad to its home screen. If you or your student ever gets lost in an app or while exploring the iPad, click the home button to quickly find your way back to your home screen. After the device is powered on, you will need to connect it to the internet. To do this, select the settings icon on the iPad. The icon is indicated on the screen. Again, this is the settings icon located at the bottom of my screen. As shown, when the settings icon is selected, the settings will open on the iPad. Select the Wi-Fi icon at the left. Ensure that the Wi-Fi switch is toggled to the right so it displays as green. Then select the Wi-Fi network of your choice and enter the password if prompted. For assistance with obtaining internet access, use the link we will drop in the chat. After the device is online, students can begin navigating and exploring apps on the iPad. We suggest students and parents, if possible, spend some time exploring the iPad just to become familiar with how it functions. If you are still in the settings or in another app, remember a single click of the home button will take users to the home screen. Apps are stored on the home screen. Swiping left and right on the home screen may reveal more apps. You will notice CPS has installed some Google apps that your student might be asked to use for remote learning. You can see in the animation on my screen that a single click of the home button returns the user from the CPS portal to the home screen. We'll talk more about the portal in a bit. Double pressing the home button will show users recently opened apps. This can make switching from one app to another easier. We'll talk more about this when we explore Google Classroom. The image on my screen shows the grid view of previously opened apps that appears when the home button is selected twice. Once a user sees the app of their choice, then they simply click on the app to open. Again, that's a double press of the home screen button to see the grid view I'm currently showing. The dock is a small area of apps at the bottom of the iPad. Apps that have been recently opened will live in the dock. Students can also store frequently used apps in the dock. Clicking and holding on an app will allow the user to move apps. Once the apps bounce on the screen, they are ready to be moved. Simply drag the app to the dock for quick and easy access. Once the app is in the dock, simply press the home button once to freeze the apps in place. As you can see in the animation on my screen, a long hold on any app makes all the apps bounce. Then the app is dragged to the dock. Finally, the app stops bouncing once the home button is clicked once. Students can also use this method to rearrange the apps on their home screen. You can adjust the volume and brightness of the iPad using the Control Center. To access the Control Center, swipe down from the top right corner. If this does not reveal the Control Center, your student might be using an older iPad. If this is the case, you must swipe up from the bottom of the screen instead. Please note, the Control Center will shift to the appropriate location regardless of the orientation of your iPad. If my iPad were upright in portrait mode, I would still swipe down from the top right corner. Volume keys are also located on the side of the iPad, as shown on my screen. An easy way to find apps and other information on an iPad is through the search feature. To use the search feature, swipe down from the middle of your home screen. Be sure not to swipe down from the very top, as this returns the iPad to its lock screen. Again, swipe down from the middle of the home screen. As shown on my screen, after you swipe down, you are able to click on the search bar at the top. You will also see recently opened apps. This is another quick way to find an app. In the search bar, you can find apps, search documents, or even ask questions like, how many cups are in a gallon? For more information on the search feature, see the link that we will add to the chat. If you find you need more help exploring your iPad, we will provide you with even more resources. In the chat, we'll share some links to some helpful resources provided by Apple and by Monica Martinez, who is currently leading the Spanish language version of this session. The resources will help you further explore buttons on your iPad, as well as identify icons you might notice at various times while using your iPad. Now that you are a bit more familiar with the iPad in general, it's time to get students logged into their CPS account through the web portal. This is important for tracking attendance and ensuring students have access to all learning materials. This step should be completed each day of remote learning. Students can use the Google Chrome browser in order to log into their CPS account. The icon for the Chrome browser is shown at the bottom of my screen. After launching Chrome, students will visit cps.edu/portal. If a student is a new user and needs to activate their account for the first time, they will click on the new user text below the password field. Then they will need to enter their legal first name, their student ID number, and their birthday. A document that details this process will be available in the chat. Now, students with an active account can simply enter their CPS username and password. If a student forgets their password, they can reset the password using the Forgot Password text above the password field. Now that students are more familiar with their iPad and have logged into the CPS portal, it's time to begin utilizing Google Apps for Education. Google Apps for Education are a free set of Google Apps designed specifically for educational uses. The hub of that learning and communication is Google Classroom. Google Classroom will likely be used daily for accessing classwork and communicating with teachers. Now, if there are students in your household using a Chromebook rather than an iPad, you might notice some differences between Google Classroom on various devices. Items might be in different locations, but please note that all features are still available on multiple platforms. Students will launch the Google Classroom app. Again, this should be preloaded on the iPad. The icon for that app is shown on my screen. The first time they launch this app, they will click the white Get Started button. Then, students will be prompted to sign into their Google account using their CPS credentials. Once students are logged into Google Classroom using their CPS credentials, they will see classes they have been enrolled in or any invitations to join classes. If a student needs to join a class, they will see a white Join button on the class tile. You can see an example of this on the first class shown in the image on my screen. Students can click the Join button to join that class. If no Join button is present, students have already automatically been enrolled in that class. They simply need to click on that class to enter. Some students might have more than one class, while others will only see one class. If you have questions about this or you do not see the appropriate classes, you can always contact the student's teacher. Additionally, if you ever find that your child is suddenly missing classes or seeing the wrong classes, double check that they are logged into the correct account in Google Classroom. They can check which account is logged in by clicking on the icon at the top right corner of the screen. You can see in the animation, when this icon is selected, we are given the option to switch to a different Google account. Now, let's talk about what you'll see in Google Classroom. When students click on a class, they will land on the stream. The stream is used for announcements and other quick posts. Students should get in the habit of checking the stream daily. If you look at the image on the screen, you'll notice other tabs across the bottom. The text shown in blue is where the student is currently located. Students should select the Classwork tab in the middle of the bottom to view any work that has been assigned to them. Students should also check their classwork every day as well. In the Classwork tab, you will see assignments and other resources shared by the teacher. Under each item, you will see a due date. In order to see a piece of classwork and complete it, the students should simply click on it. The large blue headings shown in the image on my screen are called topics. Teachers use topics to organize classwork. In order to complete a piece of classwork or simply view a resource, students should simply click on it. Once a piece of classwork has been selected, this is what students will see. Let's zoom in on some very important areas. At the top of a piece of classwork, students should look for two important items. Number one is directions. These will explain how the student should go about completing the classwork. Number two, there could be attachments that go with the classwork. Here, you can see the teacher has attached a video for students to watch. If I were to click on that video, it would automatically open the video in YouTube. However, there will always be attachments on all classwork. At the bottom of a piece of classwork, students should look for the number 3 most important area of the classwork. That is your work. This is where students will submit work or indicated that they have completed an assignment. If students by chance don't see this area, then this is not an assignment, but simply a material or resource shared by the teacher. Please note, students often overlook this area of classwork, so we need to make sure that we practice finding the Your Work section of our classwork. Here in our directions, we are told we need to mark the assignment as done, but you'll notice I'm not seeing that option on my screen. Students must click on Your Work, and the bar at the bottom of the screen will expand, and that will show them the option to mark the assignment as done. So again, we need to make sure students get in the habit of finding this area, and again, when they click on it, this will expand up and give them more options for completing their work. Now that we have selected the Your Work area, and you see it expanded on my screen, you are able to see the Mark as Done blue button. Sometimes, however, teachers will attach documents for students to interact with. Let's see how that differs. Again, in the assignment we just looked at, students were asked to watch a video and mark as done. They weren't submitting or attaching anything to their classwork. This time, however, when students click on Your Work, again, this is a different assignment, they see a document. You'll also notice this time the button says Turn In rather than Mark as Done. This indicates that the student must actually turn something in rather than just indicate that they have simply completed it. Remember, when students were simply asked to watch the video, the button said Mark as Done. If a document is attached, they will need to click on it. In the example shown on my screen, the attached document is a Google Doc. Let's see what happens when we open that Google Doc. When we first open the Google Doc, it loads as a preview. How do we know it's a preview? We see the arrow icon at the top right. This means that we are still able to launch the file in its appropriate app. Let's zoom in on that part of the screen. Here, you will also notice a pencil. Now, this is where students often get confused. If students click on that pencil, they are able to write on or annotate on that document. However, the teacher will not see these markings. They are only on that student preview. So this is not how a student should go about completing their work. Instead, if they see that Launch App icon at the top right, they should select it. This will open the document in the appropriate app. Again, all apps needed should be preloaded on the iPad. We'll talk more about these apps in a bit. You can see in the animation, when the launch icon is selected, the document loads in the correct app. Again, here it is Google Docs. Here, the student should complete the work as instructed by the teacher. After the document is launched in the appropriate app, students might find that they can't edit the document as they need to. This is where we are looking for a second pencil icon. Let's zoom in on the bottom right corner to see that icon. This time, the pencil is in a small circle at the bottom right. Students should, in fact, select this pencil to make changes to their work. So again, we are ignoring the first pencil and instead clicking on the second pencil in the circle when the document launches in the appropriate app. Once students have completed their work, they might find it difficult to get back to that Turn In button of the Google Classroom assignment. Remember, they can double press the home screen to easily switch back to Google Classroom. From here, if they are still seeing a preview of the assignment, they can simply use the X at the top left to close the preview. Again, the goal is to return to this screen in Google Classroom where we have the option to select Turn In. I'm going to pause here to make sure we can fully see this animation. So again, we are going to double click once we're finished and select Google Classroom. And here we will select the X at the top left to return to where we are able to submit that work. Now the student will be back at their assignment in Google Classroom. They will click the Turn In button to submit their work. Here, you'll also notice students have the option to private message their teacher if they have a question about the assignment. Again, this field is located just below that Turn In button as indicated by the arrow on my screen. After students have finished on this page, either by turning in or communicating with their teacher, they can simply click on the arrow at the top of the screen and the Your Work portion of the screen will minimize back down to the bottom as we viewed it earlier. Now, if you find that you or your student needs a quick and easy way to identify classwork that has and has not been completed, we can click on the 3 lines at the top left corner of the screen to reveal a menu. Let's zoom in on that. Again, clicking on the 3 lines at the top left will display a menu. Not only will this menu show the to-do list, it will also allow students to navigate from class to class as well. Here you can see that students can select the to-do list or below the to-do list, navigate to other classes. This is a view of the to-do list. Again, it allows us to see work that is assigned in blue. If I select the missing tab, I will see any missing work. And if I select the Done tab, I will see any work that has been submitted. The other primary platform for remote learning is Google Meet. Google Meet is a video conferencing platform. While Google Meet is a standalone app and website, it is also now integrated with Google Classroom. Teachers might instruct students to go to Google Classroom to join a Google Meet? If so, they will navigate to that class in Google Classroom. There, they will see a camera icon at the top right corner. Clicking here will launch the Google Meet and allow students to enter. Again, this camera app is located at the top right corner within each class where it has been enabled by the teacher. Teachers might ask students to utilize other Google apps for education, such as Google Docs, Drive, Gmail, etc. These apps should be preloaded on the iPad. Students will need to log into these apps using their CPS email account. I will give you a brief overview of some of these apps in case your student is asked to use them. Google Docs is Google's word processor. Here, students can type information, and it's also collaborative, meaning a teacher might ask that multiple students work on the same doc at once. As with all things Google, changes made to a Google Doc are automatically saved, so you won't find a save button in Google Docs. Google Slides is Google's presentation platform. Here, students can build presentations or online books. Teachers often use Google Slides for other purposes as well, like matching activities or digital worksheets. Again, no need to save when using Google Slides. CPS might install even more apps on the iPad belonging to your student. There are some examples on my screen of some of those Google apps. I know we've talked about several of these, but remember, most things that your students are asked to do will start in Google Classroom. So if you feel familiar or work to become familiar with Google Classroom, you will be ready to go with remote learning. Now, I know that was a lot of information, especially if you are new to iPads. You might be feeling a little overwhelmed, or maybe you're curious about how you can get more help as questions arise during the remote learning experience. The great news is that there are tons of resources available to CPS students and families if you or your student needs additional support. CPS has a new site specifically designed to help support families during remote learning. This site will provide you with resources and contact information should you or your student encounter difficulties. We will add that link on the screen for you. CPS also has a hotline just for guardians available Monday through Friday from 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. This support is available in both English and Spanish, and we highly recommend that you either jot down this number or add it to your phone contacts for easy access. That number is 773 417 1060. Again, I will reemphasize that was a lot to cover in a short amount of time, but we do appreciate you taking time out of your evening to join us today. Hopefully you feel a bit more well-equipped to help your student learn and grow with an iPad. Continue to add your questions to the chat. We will turn our attention to that chat in just a bit. But before we shift gears to the Q&A portion of our session, I want to thank everyone for learning and growing with us today. The Chicago Public School team is here to help, and there are some amazing resources and support systems from our family and community educator training team. Google for Education has been so generous in providing this opportunity to share. We hope that you stick around for some questions and answers. And just as a reminder, we will be posting this video soon. Be sure to share in the chat, be sure to return to the video, and be sure to keep lines of communication open with educators and with experts so we can all continue to learn from one another. At this time, I'm going to stop sharing my screen as we shift to trying to answer more of your questions. Lisa and Ellen are going to hop back on screen with me. So at this time, Lisa, Ellen, were there any items in the chat that you noticed that we need to draw attention to or discuss?
One question, can I directly submit from Google Slides?
There is an option in Google Slides to turn in the assignment, but that turn in button will also be located in Google Classroom, so students will have multiple options for turning in the assignment. Anything else?
No, it's
Wow.
very good. I don't know.
All right.
Is the Spotlight feature available for iPad and Meet?
Ooh, that's a great question. Lisa, do you know the answer to that?
You're on mute.
Sorry, let me get unmuted. Say that one more time, Amy.
Is the Spotlight feature available in Google Meet on an iPad?
You know, there aren't as many layout features. Let me pull it up real quick and I'll check and see because I know some of those don't necessarily show up as an option in the app like they would in a browser.
Yeah, I'm trying to do the same thing as well. That's a great question, though.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else while we are trying to solve the Meet question?
There is a question. Was there any reason for excluding iPro?
iPad Pro. The reason that we mentioned that early on is because the iPad Pro doesn't have the home button that most of the iPads do have. So just something to note, if you are using an iPad Pro, you will not be able to use those tricks that I mentioned regarding the home button because you won't have one.
And then this was asked earlier too. On the iPad, I'm unable to see Google Meet link on the iPad, though I'm able to see it on my MacBook.
Unable to see the Meet link.
Mm-hmm.
Let me pull it up and see if I can replicate that.
It does look like on the Meet app, there are not the same layout options in a Google Meet on the Google Meet app versus doing it in a browser. So that Spotlight layout that you might have seen us mention before, that's going to be limited to browser-based meetings that you join rather than the app.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
So I am in a Meet right now. When I first join that Meet, I am given the link on my screen. If for some reason that's not what you're seeing when you join a Meet, at the top left corner of the Meet, I can see, and I can show you this, but it'll probably be backwards. I am seeing the nickname for the Meet at the top left, which for me is just kind of some random characters. But that is what you would put at the end of meet.google.com in order to get to that link. So our Meet links are always meet.google.com / and then the nickname of the Meet. And again, that nickname lives at the top left corner. So if you're not seeing that full email address or that full web address, that is how you can combine those two areas to make that address. Anything else?
We did have a question out there about being able to see multiple people in a meet when you're in that app. So that is one of those limitations to having a mobile application rather than a browser-based application.
That's a great point. And that honestly has been a concern kind of on the teacher end, is being afraid they would not be able to see all students. Hopefully not quite as much of a concern on the student end, as what they would probably be focusing most on would be the teacher presentation, which would fortunately be large on their screen because they would not be seeing all of the other video feeds.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We seeing anything else, ladies?
And I'm not seeing anything else.
Okay.
These are great questions.
Yeah, fantastic. It's always good when we have to look something up. That means we are learning as well.
That's right.
All right. Well, again,
I know at the very beginning, we did have a few people ask about navigating between apps. Like when I'm in classroom, the teacher shares a link either in the Meet or in classroom, you know, being able to navigate back and forth. So just double clicking that home button is going to get you to that place where you can switch apps. So
absolutely, that's very important. And another thing I always tell my kids at home when they feel like they're lost because they've gone into so many apps is if they look at the top left corner of the app they're in, they'll usually see the app that they were last in with a little arrow that allows them to click that and return back so they can kind of back their way out of an app. Again, at the top left corner, or that double click on the home button makes it really easy. All right. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. As we said, this will be up for you to rewatch in the future should you need to. And again, thank you, and we wish you all the best as you dive into this new and exciting school year. So thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.